Rain was falling like a whisper that night in New York City, 1997. The streets gleamed under pale streetlights, every puddle reflecting the blurred colors of passing cars and neon signs. The city never truly slept, but in this particular corner of Manhattan, down a narrow alley between two brick buildings, the noise seemed to fade into something almost sacred. A taxi rolled slowly by, its headlights cutting through the mist. Inside, the driver noticed a young woman standing still in the alley's mouth, half hidden in shadow, her umbrella trembling in her hand. She looked lost not in direction, but in time, like someone who had walked too far into a memory she didn't belong to. She was clutching something, a small folded note, already soft from the rain. Her lips moved as if whispering to herself, or maybe to someone unseen. The driver thought to ask if she needed help. But before he could open his door, another figure emerged from the darkness. A man tall and still, wearing an old gray coat that seemed out of place in the 90s cityscape. He stopped just a few feet from her. For a moment they didn't move. The street light above flickered. Then the man leaned closer, said something, too soft for the driver to hear, and the girl's shoulders seemed to collapse inward. She dropped the note, and when the taxi lights blinked once from a passing car, both of them were gone. The city swallowed the moment whole. The only proof that she had ever been there was a rain-streaked paper drifting across the wet pavement. The driver stepped out confused, his breath clouding in the cold. He picked up the note. The ink was smeared, but one line could still be read. Find where the memories split. He looked down the alley. Nothing but dripping fire escapes, an empty dumpster, and a faint sound, like water echoing off metal. But something about that sound didn't belong to the city. It was softer, rhythmic, like breathing. By morning, the rain had stopped. The alley looked ordinary again, just another forgotten slice of New York. Yet, for reasons he couldn't explain, the driver went back a week later. He didn't tell anyone. He just wanted to see it in daylight, to make sense of what he saw. But when he asked around, the locals said the same thing. That alley's been blocked off for years. No one believed there had ever been a girl there. No one remembered a man in a gray coat. The place was just another ghosted corner of the city, where the walls seemed to listen, and names were forgotten faster than they were spoken. It was only later, when the newspapers started whispering about the Holt case, about the missing twin, about the messages left behind, that the driver realized what he had seen that night was not random. That night had been the beginning of something much larger, something that would stretch backward into the past, through fractured memories, and into the heart of a mystery the city itself wanted to forget. And somewhere, beneath the noise of sirens and subways, New York still remembered that whisper in the alley, the one that led to the vanishing twin. Morning sunlight cut through the cracked blinds of the Holt sisters' apartment in Brooklyn, painting thin stripes across a cluttered canvas-strewn floor. The walls were alive with color, half-finished oil paintings, old Polaroids, charcoal sketches of faces that seemed to stare back. This was home to Evelyn and Clara Holt, 26-year-old twins who shared everything except their sense of reality. Clara was a grounded one, meticulous, steady, always saving old receipts and organizing her brushes by size. Evelyn was a dreamer, the one who stayed up until dawn painting abstract shapes that looked like storms breaking apart. Together, they felt like two halves of one soul, trying to stay balanced in a city that never stopped moving. To the world, they were just another pair of struggling artists. To each other, they were the only proof that they existed. They'd grown up together through quiet summers and sharp winters, their childhood shaped by a constant sense of closeness that sometimes felt supernatural. They finished each other's sentences, painted similar dreams, and occasionally woke up crying from the same nightmare. It wasn't always beautiful. Being that close to someone could feel like living in an echo, but they never questioned it. That changed one afternoon in early September 1997. Clara found Evelyn sitting on the windowsill, staring down at the street below. The radio hummed softly from the kitchen, a jazz station crackling through static. Evelyn held a letter in her hands, written on yellowed paper. She looked pale, her thumb tracing over the edges again and again. Clara asked what it was. Evelyn hesitated before passing it to her. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, like someone who hadn't written in years. The message read, Do you remember the lake? The one your father said you must never swim in again? You left something there. I can help you find it. The one who remembers. Clara frowned. What lake? Evelyn didn't answer. She looked out the window, eyes unfocused. We used to go somewhere upstate, right? Every summer. Until that year, Dad got sick. Clara tried to laugh it off. You mean Greenwood? We were, 9? You nearly drowned chasing a frog. Mom banned us from going back. But Evelyn didn't laugh. That's what she told us, she said quietly. But I remember something else. I remember standing in the water. I remember seeing myself on the shore. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara shook her head. You've been painting too much. You need sleep. That night, Clara woke to find Evelyn's bed empty. She found her sister sitting in the kitchen, the letters spread out under a single dim bulb, surrounded by half-finished coffee cups and pages of scribbled notes. Evelyn had written the same line over and over again. The one who remembers. The one who remembers. Over the next few weeks, more letters came, always left at their door, never delivered by post. Each contained a fragment of memory, details that no stranger could have known. The color of their mother's robe, the lullaby their father used to hum, even the name of Evelyn's childhood imaginary friend, Cal. At first, Clara assumed someone from their old neighborhood was playing a cruel trick. But the handwriting, it didn't match anyone they knew, and the tone of the letters was unnervingly intimate, almost protective, like a parent's voice or a mirror. Evelyn grew obsessed. She began painting scenes from the letters. 2 girls standing by a lake under a blood-orange sky, one reaching out, the other fading. She spoke less and less, sometimes muttering as if someone was whispering back. Clara tried to intervene, to pull her back into the ordinary world of rent, gallery deadlines, and grocery lists. But Evelyn's gaze had shifted somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the room they shared. Then, one evening, she said something Clara would never forget. What if one of us was never supposed to be here? The question wasn't said with fear. It was almost calm, as if Evelyn had already accepted the idea. Clara tried to dismiss it, but that night she dreamt of the lake. The water was still moonlit. 2 shadows moved beneath the surface, reaching toward each other. When one touched the other, everything turned white. When she woke, Evelyn was sitting by the window again, writing something in her notebook. The city outside was still half asleep. She looked at Clara, her voice barely audible. He's real, the one who remembers. He knows what happened to us. That morning, the mail slot clinked again. Another letter slid through. This time, the message was short, urgent, and final. Meet me where the memories split. Clara didn't know it yet, but that line would become a dividing mark in both their lives. The point where everything before started to feel like fiction, and everything after would spiral into something darker. Evelyn folded the letter carefully and placed it in her pocket. She smiled at her sister, a faint, distant smile that felt like goodbye. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that something invisible had just shifted. Somewhere deep within the endless hum of New York, a quiet clock began to count down. Rain had started again that night, fine and delicate, tapping against the glass of their apartment window like nervous fingers. Evelyn sat by the table, her hair still damp from the shower, the latest letter spread open before her. The handwriting was the same as before, elegant, deliberate, yet somehow uneven, as if the person writing it couldn't quite remember how to form certain letters. This one, though, was longer. It began with a question. Do you ever wonder why your reflection sometimes doesn't move at the same time you do? Clara read over her shoulder and felt a chill crawl down her spine. This isn't funny anymore, she said softly. You should throw these out. Evelyn didn't look up. I think he's right, she murmured. I think there's something missing. Something we were never told. She began to tell Clara about a man she'd noticed lately. Tall, thin, always wearing a gray coat, the same shade of ash that matched the letter's paper. He had followed her from the art supply store, she said, and then again near the subway. The first time, she thought it was coincidence. The second time, she was sure. He stopped me yesterday, Evelyn whispered. He said he knows about the missing summer. Clara frowned. What missing summer? The year we turned 8. The one we don't talk about. He said. She hesitated. He said I was never supposed to exist. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound came from the soft hiss of the radiator. Clara tried to laugh it off, but her throat was dry. And you believe him? Evelyn's eyes flickered up, wide and frightened. He knew things, Clara. He knew about the scar on my shoulder. He knew about Mom's lullaby, the one she sang after the lake. Clara felt her stomach tighten. That lullaby wasn't something anyone outside the family could know. She told herself Evelyn must have mentioned it somewhere, maybe in an interview or a gallery piece. But deep down, the explanation didn't fit. That night, Evelyn stayed awake until morning, painting again. She moved in bursts, wide, sweeping strokes that seemed violent at first, then careful and tender. When Clara woke, she found her sister asleep on the floor beside the finished canvas. It showed 2 girls in an alley, one standing under a streetlight, the other half vanished into the shadow of a man's coat. The next few days blurred together. Evelyn became quiet, distant. She would leave for hours, saying she needed to follow the pattern. Clara found her sketchbooks filled with strange symbols, maps of Manhattan marked with red dots, and lines of text like the memory split there or the other one remembers me. One evening, Clara came home to find the apartment lights off, candles burning on the table, and Evelyn sitting by the window with a final letter. Her eyes looked calmer than they had in weeks. Meet me where the memory split, Mulberry Alley. Clara took the note, her voice shaking. You're not going anywhere near that place. But Evelyn only smiled faintly. You don't understand. He's not trying to hurt me. He's trying to fix what went wrong. What went wrong? Evelyn looked up, her eyes shining with something between fear and revelation. Us. She stood, picked up her coat, and tucked the note into her pocket. If I find out the truth, maybe it will stop haunting you too. Clara grabbed her arm, desperate now. Evelyn, please. This isn't real. You're scaring me. Evelyn's expression softened. Don't you ever feel it? Like, the world blinks sometimes, and everything rearranges just a little? Maybe we were never meant to notice. And then she left. That night, Clara sat by the window, waiting. She told herself her sister would come back like always, a little shaken, maybe, but safe. Hours passed. The candles burned low. Outside, the wind carried the faint on the city. Sirens, laughter, a train somewhere far away. At 2:11 a.m., the phone rang. A message. Evelyn's voice, faint, distant, almost drowned by a low echo. Clara? He's here. He said the line was never supposed to hold. I think I remember now. I remember the water. I remember. Then static, a soft drip, and silence. When Clara called back, there was no answer. The next morning, she went to police. They wrote it down, asked questions, filed a report. But one detective sighed and muttered the word runaway. Clara wanted to scream. Evelyn would never run. Not without her. She went home and played the voicemail again. Each time she listened, she swore she could hear something behind Evelyn's voice, like another whisper layered just beneath it, something that almost sounded like her own. That night, the city rain began again, steady and relentless, washing the streets clean. But inside the whole apartment, a single note lay on the table beside a cold cup of coffee. Meet me where the memory split. The word seemed to pulse in the dim light, like a heartbeat. The mystery had begun, and neither twin would ever be the same again. Morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of New York morning that feels like it never really woke up. A thin mist hung over the streets, and the hum of the city was muffled, like the world had decided to whisper. Clara hadn't slept. She sat on the couch, Evelyn's empty mug still on the table, her sister's coat still draped over the chair. Every sound from outside, every car door, every footstep in the hallway, made her heart jump. But the door never opened. Evelyn never came home. By noon, Clara walked to the 10th precinct herself. The waiting area was buzzing with people. Lost property, domestic complaints, the constant rhythm of city life continuing as if her world hadn't split open. When she finally spoke to the officer at the desk, Her words trembled, but her eyes stayed dry. She described Evelyn, 26, brunette, 5'6" painter, missing since last night. The officer nodded, typing with slow indifference, asking if she tried calling friends, if Evelyn had a boyfriend, if maybe she just needed space. She wouldn't just leave, Clara said. She's my twin. I'd know if something happened. The officer offered a tight smile, the kind reserved for people who think they're saying something profound. People surprise you, he said. Even family. They filed a report, stamped it, and moved on. Clara walked home through the drizzle, clutching the paper like it meant something. But the ink bled in her hand, the words missing person, pending follow-up turning into gray streaks. That evening, she listened to the voicemail again. The sound of Evelyn's voice played through the cheap speaker, fragile, ghost-like. Clara? He's here. Then that pause, the drip, the static. Each time Clara replayed it, she swore she could hear another sound beneath the noise, a faint echo, like someone else breathing in sync with Evelyn. She took the cassette recorder from her art desk, held it close to the speaker, and played the message one last time. This time she slowed it down, and that's when she heard it. A whisper so low it could have been imagined, but it wasn't. The voice said one word, remember. Her hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the recorder. Over the next few days, Clara retraced every place Evelyn had gone recently. The gallery on Orchard Street, the supply store on Canal, the coffee shop where she'd sketched faces of strangers. Everyone remembered her vaguely, but not clearly enough. She seemed distracted, one barista said, kept checking her watch. A man at the gallery mentioned she'd asked if they had any photos from 1987, 10 years before. We opened in 1990, he said with a shrug. No one had seen her after 9 p.m. Thursday night. No one, except a taxi driver who'd filed a report of his own. He'd seen a girl standing in an alley on Mulberry Street, holding a note, talking to a man in a gray coat. The girl vanished moments later. The officer on duty never connected the two cases. But when Clara overheard the story by chance, something inside her turned cold. She went to the alley that same evening. Mulberry Alley was narrower than she'd imagined, barely wide enough for a car to pass through. The bricks were dark with age, graffiti layered over older graffiti. A single flickering light buzzed above. The rain had returned, thin as smoke, making the ground shine like glass. She stood where the driver said the girl had been seen. For a moment, she swore she could still smell Evelyn's perfume, faint lavender mixed with turpentine. She crouched and ran her fingers across the wet concrete. That's when she found it, a small scrap of paper, pressed flat by the rain. The writing was smeared, but one sentence was still legible. If you see me, don't follow. Clara froze. It was Evelyn's handwriting. Her breath quickened. She looked down the alley, empty, but for a brief second, she thought she saw a movement at the far end, a shape just out of reach of the light. She stepped forward, calling softly, "Evelyn?" The echo came back to her voice, the same tone, the same pitch, like the alley itself was answering. That night, Clara brought the note home and spread it beside the others. There were 6 in total now. She read them in order, searching for meaning, for patterns, for something. Together, they formed fragments of a story she couldn't quite piece together. A message left by someone who was both there and not. The one who remembers. Do you remember the lake? You left something there. The memory split. Meet me? If you see me, don't follow. She realized something strange. Each letter used the same brand of stationery, the same ink, and the same subtle indentation in the paper. But when she examined the signatures, they were slightly different, as if written by 2 hands that shared the same muscle memory but not the same rhythm. 2 versions of the same person. Sleep refused to come. She wanted the apartment, Evelyn's paintings looming from every wall. The one by the window, the alley scene, looked different now. In the darkness, the brushstrokes seemed to move. The shadow of the man in the painting appeared closer, the light dimmer. For a second, Clara thought she saw her own reflection inside the paint, shimmering faintly on the glass of the frame. When morning came, she called the police again. No new leads, no witnesses, no surveillance footage that showed Evelyn leaving the alley. The last thing anyone saw of her was her reflection in the wet pavement, a twin image swallowed by rain. Clara sat by the window and finally cried, not the soft tears of worry, but the kind that shake the body, the soundless kind that seemed to come from the spine. She thought of all the times Evelyn had laughed, all the half-finished jokes, the arguments about who used the last of the paint thinner, the quiet moments when they'd share a single blanket and talk about their future. Now, the silence in the apartment was unbearable. That night, she opened Evelyn's last sketchbook. On the final page, drawn in hurried strokes, was the same alley, but this time, two women stood there. One was stepping forward. The other was fading away, her outline made of mist. Beneath it, Evelyn had written a single phrase, "The twin always disappears first." The rain outside grew heavier, and the sound blended with the faint hum of the radiator, filling the room with a hollow rhythm. Clara closed the book and whispered her sister's name once, softly. The city didn't answer. Somewhere between memory and reality, Evelyn Holt had vanished, and Clara, without realizing it, had already begun to follow. Days turned into weeks, but the city didn't stop. The subways kept running, taxis kept honking, and people still spilled out of cafes with half-finished conversations on their lips. But for Clara, time had slowed into a single loop. Morning coffee gone cold, phone calls unanswered, the same sentence echoing through her head like a curse. If you see me, don't follow. The police case had gone quiet. One detective left her a voicemail saying they'd follow up if new evidence emerged. They never did. Every time Clara called, she was met with polite apologies and redirected extensions. Eventually, the case number, #970310H, became the only proof that Evelyn had ever existed in their files. So Clara decided to search alone. She started where her sister's world had ended, Mulberry Alley. By daylight, it looked like every other neglected corner of Lower Manhattan. A line of overflowing dumpsters, rusted fire escapes, faded graffiti tags in every color. But there was something about the air there, heavy in a way that didn't feel natural. When she stood still long enough, she could hear faint echoes, the rattle of a distant gate, the hiss of a leaking pipe, a rhythm that sounded almost human. She began asking questions. The florist on the corner said the alley had been closed off once in the early 80s after a collapse. The owner of the deli across the street remembered a time when it wasn't even marked on city maps. "It's not a place people go," he said, slicing bread without looking up. "It's a place people pass by." One afternoon, Clara found herself standing in front of a narrow convenience store with fog windows. The old man behind the counter recognized Evelyn's photo instantly. "Ah, the girl who bought the tapes," he said. "What tapes?" Clara asked. She came in 3 times. Bought blank cassettes. Said she needed to record something she couldn't see. He shrugged. Nice girl. Quiet eyes. Like she was already half somewhere else. Clara left the store with her heart pounding. On impulse, she checked the city's public CCTV archives, a service mostly used for insurance claims and police verification. It took her days of phone calls and a fake story about a lost shipment before someone finally granted her access to the footage near Mulberry Street from a night Evelyn vanished. When she opened the file, her hands trembled. The grainy footage showed rain falling on empty streets. The timestamp, 2:09 and 37 seconds a.m., September 18th, 1997. A woman in a dark coat entered the frame. Evelyn. She walked slowly into the mouth of the alley, her shoulders hunched, her hand clutching something, the letter, maybe. She hesitated once, then looked behind her, as if expecting someone. The camera flickered. For exactly 1 second, another figure appeared, tall, blurred like a smudge of gray. Then the frame stabilized, and Evelyn was gone. No exit, no sound, just a steady fall of rain. Clara watched it over and over. Every pixel burned into her mind. She even sent it to an independent technician, who confirmed there were no jump cuts, no tampering. It was as if her sister had stepped out of existence. That night, Clara returned to the alley again, driven by something she couldn't name. She brought a small recorder, the same kind Evelyn had bought. She stood in the same spot from the footage and pressed record. At first, there was only static. Then, faintly under the rain, a whisper. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it carried a tone, a rhythm that felt achingly familiar. She played it back later at home, amplifying the sound through her speakers. Somewhere within the distortion, she swore she heard her name. Her nights became consumed by that voice. She began tracing Evelyn's last weeks in obsessive detail, mapping every location she'd visited on a large canvas in the apartment. Each red pin became a heartbeat. The map grew denser, the lines between them like veins, stretching from Brooklyn to Chinatown, circling back to Mulberry again and again. One evening, Clara met a doorman who worked at a nearby building. When she showed him Evelyn's photo, he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw her once," he said. "She was sketching the alley from across the street, but it was strange. There was no one there. Still, she kept talking, like she was answering someone." "What do you mean?" She'd pause, tilt her head, then smile like she was listening. Clara's chest tightened. She thanked him and left, but his words replayed in her mind all the way home. That night, she set up a small camera facing the alley from her own window across the block. For hours, she watched. People came and went. A homeless man slept near the entrance. A cat darted by. Then, around 2 a.m., her screen glitched. Just for a second, the static formed a shape, 2 silhouettes, standing side by side. Then it was gone. Sleep became impossible. Food lost its taste. Clara began sketching Evelyn from memory. But each time she finished, the faces came out wrong. The eyes were too dark. The smile too hollow, as if the person on the paper wasn't quite her sister, but something that had borrowed her shape. The people around her began to notice the change. Friends stopped calling after she missed too many shifts at the gallery. The landlord left notes about rent. The world was still moving, but Clara wasn't part of it anymore. The city was now a labyrinth of reflections. Every puddle looked like a window, every mirror a trapdoor. Sometimes, walking down the street, she thought she caught glimpses of Evelyn on a subway platform, in a crowd, turning a corner. But when she followed, there was always no one there. Then came the mural. One morning, she found a new painting on the wall of the alley. Someone had scrawled it in gray and blue, large enough to stretch across the bricks. It showed 2 women, identical, facing each other across a narrow corridor. Between them, a crack of light split the wall like a wound. Beneath it, in white paint, someone had written, "The memory split here." Clara stood there for what felt like hours, the noise of the city fading around her. She didn't know who had painted it. She didn't care. She only knew one thing now. Evelyn hadn't been taken. She'd gone back to wherever the memory had first broken. And Clara, trembling in the rain, realized she would follow, no matter what waited on the other side. The deeper Clara searched, the more the world around her began to feel unfamiliar, like a stage she'd walked onto in the middle of someone else's scene. The people she spoke to didn't just seem indifferent. They looked confused, as if Evelyn's name meant nothing at all. Even at the art gallery where her sister had shown her first collection, the curator blinked and said, "Evelyn Holt? I don't think I've heard that name." That was the moment Clara stopped trusting memory. Not her own, not anyone else's. She began looking for proof. Birth certificates, school records, hospital documents from their childhood. Most of it matched, until she reached 1987. That year was different. The trail ended abruptly. Their family's address was still listed, but there were no school reports, no photographs, no medical visits. Just a blank year. When she called a county office upstate, the woman on the line hesitated after searching the archives. "That's strange," she said. "We have a file for a Holt child admitted that summer, but only one." Clara froze. There were 2. The woman double-checked. "No, ma'am. Just one. A drowning incident. No surviving twin listed." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara's throat closed up. She thanked the woman, hung up, and sat still for a long time, staring at the silent apartment around her. The air seemed thicker. Even the ticking of the clock sounded different. Offbeat, delayed, like the rhythm of her own heartbeat was falling out of sync. That night, she opened the old wooden box her father had kept, a box they'd never touched since his death. Inside were family photos, brittle with age. Most were normal, birthdays, holidays, sunlit summers. But in one photo, dated July 1987, something was wrong. It showed their parents standing near a lake. Her mother's arm wrapped around a child, small, smiling, Evelyn. But where Clara should have been, there was only space. An empty patch of grass. The edge of a shadow fell there, almost like something had once been beside them, something erased. She stared at the photo until her vision blurred. Then she flipped it over. On the back, written faintly in their mother's handwriting, was a single phrase, "Our Evelyn, the one who stayed." Her hands trembled. She pulled out more photos. Some showed both girls, but in others, only one. Sometimes it was her. Sometimes it was Evelyn. Never both in the same year. It was as if the past itself couldn't decide which of them had survived. Driven by panic, she contacted the old hospital listed on the form. Most of the staff had long since retired, but one name appeared again and again in the archived documents. Dr. Aaron Heller, a pediatric neurologist. She found a number that might have been his, written on an old business card wedged in the file. To her surprise, he answered. His voice was dry, aged, weary. "I'm looking for information about the Holt twins," Clara said quickly. "Summer of '87. You treated one of us." Silence hummed on the other end. Then a sigh. "You shouldn't have found me," he said softly. "That file was sealed." "Then tell me why," Clara demanded. Another pause. "Because one of you didn't make it. At least, not in the way you think." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "What does that mean?" Dr. Heller hesitated, his voice lowering as if speaking to himself. "They called it experimental. A neurological synchronization study. The parents were desperate. The twins were identical, perfect candidates. They said, after the incident at the lake, one's brain activity faded. The other surged. So they tried to bridge the gap. To carry the surviving consciousness through shared neural mapping. It worked, partially, but the data was destroyed. The child recovered, or seemed to, but there were signs, mirror reactions, shared dreams, dissociative speech, as if two memories were trying to inhabit the same mind. Clara's hand tightened around the phone. Which one survived? "I don't know," he whispered. That was the question none of us could answer. The line went dead. Clara sat in the dark, her body trembling. Her whole life she had believed in one simple truth, that she and Evelyn were two separate people. But what if that wasn't true? What if one of them was a reconstruction, a living echo that inherited the other's memory? She ran to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. The face staring back looked the same, tired, pale, hollow-eyed. But for a brief, impossible moment, the reflection didn't move when she did. It blinked a half-second late, and she stumbled backward, gasping. That night, she dreamed of the lake. The water was black and endless, rippling under a white sky. Two figures stood at the edge, children, both identical. One stepped forward. The other reached out to stop her. But as soon as their hands touched, the reflection in the water changed. One girl standing alone, her shadow rippling as if it were alive. She woke with a scream caught in her throat. Her body was drenched in sweat. For a long moment, she didn't know which name belonged to her. The next morning, she returned to her father's box. At the bottom, under old sketches, she found something else, a small cassette labeled Holt Case, private copy. The handwriting wasn't her father's. It was Dr. Heller's. The tape was old, the ribbon nearly brittle. When she played it, the hiss filled the room before a man's voice came through, calm, clinical. Subject is responsive. Neural pattern suggests synchronized recall between twin nodes. Then a pause. Subject reports visual duplication. Claims to see herself standing beside the bed. A small voice, young and shaking, followed. She's not supposed to be here. Then, softly, she says she remembers what I forgot. The recording ended abruptly. leaving the hum of the machine spinning into silence. Clara sat frozen. The walls around her felt smaller. It wasn't just that Evelyn might have vanished. It was that maybe, just maybe, she was never supposed to exist in the same world as Clara for this long. And somewhere under the noise of the city, Clara began to feel it. The faint hum of another heartbeat that didn't belong to her. The forgotten summer wasn't forgotten at all. It had simply been buried, until memory itself began to wake it up. Clara found him by accident, or maybe fate had been waiting for her to. After days of chasing phone numbers that led nowhere and records sealed by law, a name surfaced in an old hospital payroll ledger. Leon Vargas, maintenance staff, employed at the children's neurological ward from 1986 to 1988. The entry beside his name read terminated for unauthorized entry into restricted storage. The address listed was in the Bronx, a few stops past the end of the line, in a part of the city that always felt gray even on sunny days. The building leaned slightly, its bricks stained with decades of soot. The hallway reeked of old paint and dust. When Clara knocked, she half expected no answer. But after a moment, the door creaked open and a man appeared, tall, thin, eyes sunken but sharp. His voice was a rasp of forgotten years. "You shouldn't have come here," he said before she'd even spoken. "I'm looking for answers," Clara replied. "About my sister, about the summer of 1987. Something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, fear, regret. "You're one of them," he whispered. Leon let her in. The apartment was cluttered with paper stacks, old film reels, broken radios, and boxes labeled with words like Heller, synchronization, and Project Twinline. On the table lay dozens of faded Polaroids, photographs of children in hospital gowns, their eyes covered by black bars. "Dr. Heller told me about you," Clara said carefully. "He said you worked at the hospital during the experiment." Leon gave a humorless laugh. "He told you just enough to ruin your sleep, didn't he? Tell me what happened," she pressed. He sat heavily in a chair by the window, the light slanting across his face like a confession. "They thought they could cheat death," he said. "Your parents were desperate. One twin drowned, I don't know which. Heller and his team had been studying something they called neural resonance, a theory that identical twins could share more than genetics. They wanted to see if one could carry the other across." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "And they did it?" "They tried." He rubbed his hands together slowly. "The machine they built wasn't designed for children. It used mirrored light pulses, sound frequencies, sleep cycles. Things I didn't understand. But I remember the noise, like electricity under the skin. When the experiment ended, one child woke up, the other didn't. But a week later, strange things started happening." "What things?" "Mirrors flickered. Machines recorded phantom vitals. One nurse swore she saw the dead twin sitting upright, talking to the living one. Heller shut it all down. He said it was just trauma, grief, shared delusion. But I saw it too. I saw both of you walking the hall one night." Clara's heart stopped. "That's impossible." He looked at her steadily. "Is it?" He reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward her. Inside was a photocopied incident report. The heading read Unscheduled Neurological Test. Subject hold. Beneath it, a single sentence. Subject exhibited dual response to stimulus. Latency consistent with temporal mirroring. Clara scanned the lines again and again. Temporal mirroring? Leon's lips tightened. "It means time itself glitched around you. Your consciousness overlapped. Maybe both of you did survive, just not in the same moment." She stared at him, her pulse quickening. "Are you saying Evelyn didn't die? That she's trapped somewhere?" "I'm saying you're both real," he said softly. "But one of you belongs to the memory, not the world. And when memory wakes up..." He trailed off, his gaze distant. "The other has to fade." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Where is she?" Leon didn't answer. Instead, he stood, crossed the room, and pulled open a drawer. From it, he took a cassette, identical to the one she'd found. "This was recorded during one of the last sessions," he said. "It's labeled Resonance Drift, Twinline 04. He handed it to her, his hand trembling. "I've listened to it once." "Never again." Clara tucked it into her coat. Why me? Why now? Leon exhaled, his voice low. Because she's trying to come back. The one who remembers always tries. A silence fell heavy between them. Outside, sirens wailed distantly, echoing through the cracked windows. Clara's hands felt numb. She stood to leave, but Leon called after her. "Do you want to know something strange?" he said. "Every few years, someone comes asking about you. A woman, always. Looks just like you, but says her name's Evelyn. I tell her what I can, but she never remembers coming before." Clara's knees almost buckled. "That's not possible." Leon gave her a small, broken smile. "You're proof that impossible things don't care what we believe." When Clara stepped back onto the street, the city looked different. Sharper somehow, colors too vivid, sounds too close. She felt as if she were walking inside someone else's dream. Every window reflected her face twice. Every puddle rippled when she passed. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at the cassette. Her reflection in the darkened glass window looked like Evelyn. Same face, same eyes, but the faintest difference in how it tilted its head. She played the tape. Static filled the room. Then a voice, Evelyn's voice, emerged faintly. "If I cross, she disappears. If I stay, I fade." Then Dr. Heller's voice. "You're safe. There's no one else here." But Evelyn's reply came through cracked and distorted. "She's standing right behind you." The tape ended with a sound, soft breathing, then a whisper too quiet to understand. Clara sat motionless for a long time. The room felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. Then she turned slowly toward the window. For a split second, she saw her reflection smiling. Even though she wasn't, she smashed the glass with her fist. Blood mixed with the rain outside as she whispered her sister's name. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard Evelyn whisper it back. And for the first time, Clara understood. The man in the gray coat wasn't a stranger. He was a messenger, a bridge between one half of a soul and the other, the one who remembered. The night Clara found the tape marked Hold Anomaly, Session 4, the rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It soaked the window glass until the city beyond looked melted. Lights bleeding into each other, streets shimmering like veins. Her apartment was dim except for the small circle of light cast by the desk lamp, where the cassette lay waiting. She stared at it for a long time before pressing play. The tape hissed, then crackled to life. A man's voice, Dr. Heller, spoke first, calm and measured. Session 4. Subject reports recurring dreams correlated with previous anomalies. Proceeding with open recall. Then Evelyn's voice. At first, it was almost gentle, soft, hesitant, the way she sounded when she was unsure of her art. "It's the same dream," she said. "I'm standing in water. It's black and still. There's glass all around me. Not walls, just corridors. I can see myself walking down one of them." Her breath caught. "But the one walking isn't me." She moves slower. Sometimes she looks up. Sometimes she smiles. Dr. Heller's voice. "And what happens then?" A pause. Then Evelyn's tone shifted, quieter, as if she were speaking from somewhere deeper. "She whispers things I forgot. She tells me where to find them. She says she's waiting for me on the other side." The tape whined with static, as if the machine itself flinched. Then came another voice, faint, layered under Evelyn's. It sounded almost identical, but not quite. A breath out of sync. A heartbeat delayed. "It's not the other side," it murmured. "It's the same place twice." Clara froze. Her heart hammered in her chest. She replayed the segment, turned up the volume, pressed her ear close. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't feedback. It was a second voice, Evelyn's double. She listened to the rest in silence, her skin prickling. Dr. Heller, "You said you remember drowning." Evelyn, "Not drowning. Splitting, like I fell through myself." Dr. Heller, "Do you remember which of you came back?" A long silence followed. Then Evelyn whispered something so soft it almost didn't exist. "That's the problem. We both did." The tape ended abruptly, the reel spinning into a low hum that filled the room. Clara sat motionless. The sound seemed to sink into her bones. She could almost feel her sister's breath behind the words, her voice threading through the air like a ghost learning how to speak again. She rewound the tape and played it once more. But this time, when Evelyn's voice said, "She's waiting for me on the other side," Clara answered aloud, whispering, "Where?" The light flickered. The air shifted. For a moment, she swore the shadow cast on the wall didn't match her movements. Later that night, Clara visited the small newspaper office where her friend Jonah Wells worked, one of the few people who hadn't stopped answering her calls. He specialized in urban mysteries and lost files, the kind of stories the city wanted buried. When she handed him the tape, his eyebrows rose. "Where did you get this?" "From someone who shouldn't exist," she said. Jonah played it through his sound equipment, running spectral filters, removing static, isolating frequencies. On the computer screen, two waveforms appeared, identical in shape, slightly displaced in time. "There are two voices," he said slowly. "They're the same frequency pattern, but one's lagging by maybe 0.37 seconds. Like an echo?" He shook his head. "No, echoes distort. This one completes her sentences. It's like one voice knows what the other will say, just slightly too soon." Clara leaned closer, like a reflection speaking before the person does. Jonah looked uneasy. "You're saying this is your sister?" "I'm saying this might be both of us." They stared at the monitor, the two ghostly patterns pulsing in unison. Then Jonah slowed the playback to half speed. Between the beats of static, another sound emerged, faint breathing, followed by a single word whispered in reverse. He inverted it. The word became clearer. "Follow." The room felt colder. Clara took the tape back that night. She walked home through rain-slick streets, passing windows that reflected her face over and over, each slightly different, as if caught mid-expression. When she reached her apartment, she played the tape again. But this time, something changed. The second voice, the one that had been half hidden, began to grow clearer with every loop. It spoke softly, pleadingly. "You're forgetting me. You're walking too far away. Don't let them tell you which one of us survived." The lights dimmed for a moment, then steadied. Clara clutched the recorder to her chest, tears welling. "Evelyn," she whispered, "if you can hear me." The tape clicked, interrupting her. Evelyn's voice, unmistakably alive, present, cut through the static. "I do." The machine stopped spinning. Clara stared at it in horror and wonder. Her hands trembled, but a strange calm began to spread through her, the way grief sometimes turns into clarity. She realized then that the tape wasn't just a recording. It was a bridge, a thin slit in time, capturing a moment when the sisters' realities overlapped. She sat in silence for a long time, letting the rain fill the silence the way Evelyn's laughter once did. Then she whispered one final question into the dark. "Where are you now?" And though the recorder was off, she swore she heard her sister's voice answer faintly, not from the speaker, but from somewhere inside the walls, from behind the glass, from beneath the rhythm of the rain, where the memory split. Clara closed her eyes. The city outside seemed to hold its breath. She understood now. Evelyn hadn't vanished. She had crossed over into the part of memory where reality thinned. And that realization was both beautiful and terrifying. Because if Evelyn could cross, so could she. The night Clara decided to return to Mulberry Alley, the city felt like it was holding its breath. The rain had stopped at last, but the air was thick, humid, almost electric. The kind of quiet that comes before something irreversible. She had replayed the tapes, reread the letters, and listened to Evelyn's voice until her mind began to bend around the words. There was nothing left to discover from the outside. Whatever truth remained was in that alley, waiting like an open wound. It was 2:03 a.m. when she stepped off the curb. Her reflection followed her in the puddles, stretching, distorting, as if reluctant to go where she was going. She clutched Evelyn's final letter in her hand, the one that said, "If you see me, don't follow." But even as she read it again, she knew she would ignore it. Some laws of love were stronger than warnings. Mulberry Alley was exactly as she remembered, narrow, brick walls slick with moisture, The faint hum of a transformer somewhere above, the distant sound of late-night laughter fading as she stepped inside. The deeper she walked, the more the air seemed to thicken. Streetlights flickered at her back. Ahead, the darkness pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. She stopped halfway down. The ground glistened where the water pooled unevenly. Her shoes made no sound. She unfolded the letter, smoothing its creases with trembling fingers, and read aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Meet me where the memories split." Her words seemed to echo back not from the walls, but from beneath them, as if something were answering. Clara's breath caught. For a moment, she thought she saw a movement at the far end, a figure standing under the last light, pale and still. She blinked hard. The shape remained. It was Evelyn. Her sister looked exactly as she had the night she vanished. Hair damp, expression calm, eyes shining with the kind of quiet that hides both fear and understanding. She was smiling, just slightly. The kind of smile that used to mean trust me. Clara's heart pounded. "Evelyn." The figure didn't answer. Clara took a single step forward. The sound echoed impossibly loud. The air seemed to bend around them. The distant hum of the city fading until there was only the rhythmic drip of water. The smell of rain mixed with something colder, metallic, like ozone. For a heartbeat, Clara thought she heard two sets of breathing, hers and another's, perfectly synchronized. She wanted to run to her, to bridge the distance, to undo the years of doubt. But as she moved closer, the light between them began to flicker. Evelyn didn't move, didn't speak, only lifted her hand slowly, palm outward, as if warning her to stop. "Don't," Clara whispered, half to herself, half to the ghost before her. But she couldn't stop. Every step forward made the air ripple like disturbed water. The walls around her seemed to stretch away, the alley lengthening, growing deeper. The bricks blurred, their edges softening. When she was close enough to see the reflection of the streetlight in Evelyn's eyes, she realized something terrible. Evelyn's lips were moving, not in sync with her own breath, but slightly delayed, like the reflection that had haunted her mirror weeks ago. Evelyn was mouthing the same words Clara had just spoken. "Don't." The streetlight above them buzzed violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed everything. For a moment, there was no sound except rain dripping from somewhere unseen. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. Then a voice, soft and close. "You came anyway." It was Evelyn's voice. But it wasn't coming from ahead. It was beside her, too close. Clara turned sharply. The space behind her was shifting, the shadows moving like fabric. "I had to find you," she whispered. "You already did," the voice said. "You've been finding me over and over." Clara's hands trembled. "What are you?" "I'm the half that stayed. You're the half that crossed." The alley began to pulse with light again, but now it came from the walls themselves, faint veins of silver crawling through the bricks, illuminating words that weren't there before. Remember, return, repeat. Evelyn stepped closer. Her eyes shimmered strangely, as though reflecting two worlds at once. "You were supposed to forget," she said gently, "but you wouldn't let go." Clara shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "You're real. I can touch you." She reached out. Evelyn did the same. Their fingertips met. The world fractured. For a single heartbeat, Clara saw everything at once. The lake, the hospital room, Dr. Heller's machines, her mother's face wet with tears. Two children standing side by side, one gasping for breath, the other whispering, "Take mine." Then the sound of water closing over both. She fell to her knees, gasping. The alley was gone. In its place stretched an endless corridor of glass, just like Evelyn had described, reflections on every side. In each pane, she saw herself, dozens of versions, one crying, one reaching out, one fading. And in the center of it all stood Evelyn. "I tried to stay away," Evelyn said softly, "but the memory kept calling you back. Every time you remember me, I wake up, and every time I wake up," she looked at her sister with infinite sadness, "you start to fade." Clara felt her body trembling, edges of her vision dissolving like smoke. "I don't care. I'd rather vanish than forget you." Evelyn smiled faintly, that same heartbreaking smile she'd worn in every dream. "You always say that." The glass corridor rippled. The reflections began to merge. Clara reached for her again, her voice breaking. "Please, don't leave me again." But Evelyn's form was already flickering, the light swallowing her from the edges inward. "Maybe this time," Evelyn whispered, "we'll find a way to stay." The sound cracked, a flash, a burst of white, and then the camera cut, static, silence, and one final frame. A single image, Clara standing alone in the alley, one hand raised toward nothing. The timestamp froze at 2:11 a.m. She never moved again. The investigation into the Holt case quietly unraveled in the months that followed. There were no more witnesses, no new tips, no evidence left to collect. The detectives who had once handled the file spoke of it in fragments, the kind of unsolved story they carried home but never discussed at dinner. On record, it remained just another missing persons case. Off record, even the officers couldn't agree on what had really happened that night in Mulberry Alley. They had the footage, or what was left of it. The final minute of security tape, the one installed by a neighboring shop, showed Clara walking into the alley at 2:10 a.m., clutching something in her hand. The camera caught the reflection of her umbrella in a puddle, then static. When the image returned, the alley was empty. The timestamp continued rolling until dawn. The police searched every inch of the space. No blood, no signs of struggle. The only things they found were a folded letter soaked through with rain and a single shoe print facing the wrong direction, as if someone had been walking out, but backward. The lab couldn't even confirm whose print it was. For weeks afterward, Clara's apartment remained sealed off, a temporary crime scene turned into an archive of ghosts. Inside, investigators found her walls covered in sketches. Hundreds of them. Some were portraits of Evelyn. Others were warped reflections of both sisters standing in the same frame, one slightly transparent. There were also pages filled with words written over and over again. The memory split, the one who remembers, the echo stays. When the boxes were eventually released to storage, and in turn cataloging them noticed something odd. In one of the tapes labeled Evidence Copy, the reflection in the alley camera didn't match the figure walking. The reflection moved half a second later, a perfect mirror lag, like a delayed heartbeat. The intern mentioned it once, laughing nervously, then never brought up again. The news ran the story briefly. Brooklyn twin disappears following sister's vanishing. It circulated for a week before being buried under newer tragedies. People called it eerie, tragic, cinematic. Then they forgot. The world always forgets. But New York has a way of remembering what it buries. Over the years, the alley changed hands. Developers tried to seal it off, to demolish the old brick facades and repave the street. Every time, the project stalled, permits lost, investors backing out, accidents on site. Workers claimed their equipment would fail near the middle of the alley. Lights would flicker. A radio would catch static that, for a moment, sounded like whispering. The locals stopped cutting through that part of Mulberry. They said the air there felt wrong. Colder in summer, heavier in winter. Someone painted over the old mural that had appeared years before, the one that showed two women facing each other across a crack of light. But the paint kept peeling. The outline always returned, faint but unmistakable. In 2004, a new cafe opened at the corner. The owner installed modern security cameras to keep watch over the alley, more out of superstition than necessity. For months, the feed showed nothing unusual, just passing cats, wind, and shadows. Then one night in October, the motion sensor triggered at 2:11 a.m. The footage lasted only 8 seconds. Two silhouettes appeared at the mouth of the alley, identical in height and shape, walking hand in hand through the rain. They paused beneath the broken streetlight. The taller one tilted her head, as if listening to something, then both turned and looked directly at the camera. The feed glitched and the screen went black. The cafe owner thought it was a prank until he reviewed the camera data. The timestamp read October 17th, 2:11 a.m., exactly 7 years to the day since Clara Holt vanished. He called the police, who arrived the next morning. They checked the alley again, finding nothing except 2 sets of footprints in the dust. both leading inward, none leading out. That was the last official entry in the Holt file. After that, the case was archived under unresolved disappearances, stored alongside hundreds of others. But among the detectives who'd worked it, the story lived on, told in hushed tones to rookies during late-night shifts. They called it the Vanishing twin case. Some said the sisters had run away together. Some whispered about cults, hypnosis, psychosis. But others, the ones who'd seen the footage, who'd felt the chill in that alley, believed something different. That one twin had slipped into memory, and the other had followed her in. Even now, people walking near mulberries where they sometimes hear faint laughter when the rain hits the ground just right, or see two reflections where there should be one. A handprint on fog glass. A pair of figures caught briefly in a car's side mirror, only to vanish when you look again. And every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, the city seems to pause for a moment, just a breath, as if remembering something it promised forget. The alley stands quiet, walls scarred by time, the streetlights still flickering. The rain pools the same way it did that night, carrying the reflections of passing cars. And if you listen closely, beneath the hum of the city, beneath the endless static of life moving on, you might still hear it. Two footsteps, perfectly in sync, walking deeper into the dark. Years passed. The Holt case faded from headlines, then from conversation, then from memory. Just another ghost story in a city made of them. But in certain corners of New York, if you stayed quiet enough, the story still found you. Taxi drivers swore the alley on Mulberry felt colder than the rest of the block. Street sweepers claimed to hear faint humming in the early morning hours, like two voices blending beneath the sound of rain. Claire's apartment remained untouched for years, sealed by her landlord after her disappearance. When it was finally cleared out, the new tenants found her journal, a thick leather-bound book with the last entry dated October 17, 1997. The ink had bled slightly, but the words were still legible, written in her delicate, looping handwriting. I keep hearing her voice when I close my eyes. Sometimes I think it's memory. Sometimes I think it's something else. Evelyn said she saw me standing by the lake. What if she was right? What if I was a reflection, and she was the one who lived? I used to think remembering her was how I kept her alive. But maybe that's how I keep myself from disappearing. If she was the one who vanished, why do I feel like I'm the ghost? That entry became the last known trace of Clara Holt, and perhaps the truest. The journal made its way into a small local exhibit years later, vanished in New York, the city's unsolved stories. Visitors would stop to read the letter under the glass, not realizing they were standing only a few blocks from where it all began. Some would comment on how poetic it sounded, how hauntingly introspective, never knowing the words were likely written by a woman who had already begun to fade from the world she was describing. Every so often, someone would leave a note at the exhibit, handwritten and signed. The handwriting never matched, but the message was always the same. She remembers now. No one knew who left them. One of the museum curators, an older man with quiet fascination for unsolved cases, began visiting Mulberry Alley after closing each night. He said he felt drawn to it, that the place carried a presence, like standing between two mirrors. On the anniversary of the disappearances, he brought a tape recorder and let it run for an hour. When he played it back, there was nothing but static for the first few minutes. Then, faintly, a woman's voice. "If you see me, don't follow." He never went back after that. But the recordings circulated among amateur investigators and paranormal enthusiasts online. Some claimed they heard two voices layered together, speaking in harmony. Others said it was just city noise, air pressure, pareidolia. But every person who listened admitted one thing. There was a feeling to it, a heaviness that settled in the chest, a strange calm that felt like remembering something you'd never lived. The story of the Holt twins transformed into myth. True crime forums debated timelines and forged theories about hypnosis, shared psychosis, even government experiments. Artists reimagined their story in murals and films, always returning to the same image, two figures facing each other in an endless corridor of reflections. But some details never made it online. The police report, for instance, noted one anomaly. The final page of Clara's journal was blank when collected from evidence. The words appeared weeks later, faint at first, then darkening with time, as though the ink had decided to surface slowly, waiting for the right moment. The newly visible text read, "She's not gone. I see her in everything mirrored, windows, puddles, glass. She smiles like she forgives me. Maybe this time we remember together." The handwriting matched both sisters. Even now, people say that if you pass through Mulberry Alley during the early hours of a rainstorm, you'll catch the faint shimmer of light at the far end. Two women, hand in hand, walking through the mist. They never look back. And if you listen closely, their footsteps don't sound like two separate people. They sound like one rhythm split across time, the same soul walking both directions. Some believe it's a haunting. Others, a love story too powerful for the world to contain. But maybe it's neither. Maybe the twins found the space between remembering and forgetting, that fragile place where memory becomes eternal, not through the body, but through the echo it leaves behind. Because memory doesn't die. It drifts. It loops. It waits. And sometimes, when the city grows quiet and the night feels too still, New York remembers the sound of rain hitting glass, the shimmer of two silhouettes under a broken light, and the whisper that began it all, fine where the memories split. Then silence, the kind that feels alive. Winter arrived in New York quietly that year, like a secret it didn't want to share. Snow dusted the rooftops, thin and fragile, while the city below kept breathing, relentless, eternal, unaware that one of its deepest mysteries still lingered beneath the noise. People had stopped talking about the Holt twins. The headlines were buried. The photos faded, and the names became just another echo in the city's long history of disappearances. But the truth never really left. It just went underground. The few who still remembered, detectives, journalists, artists who swore they'd once met Evelyn or Clara, carried the story like a rumor in their bones. A quiet, private superstition. One former police officer admitted years later, "Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see her, one of them, standing in that alley. I never remember which one." Somehow, Mulberry Alley became a place people avoided, without realizing why. It wasn't cursed, not in the Hollywood sense. No screams in the night, no sudden chills. It was something smaller, subtler, a feeling that the air was thicker there, as if carrying two different versions of the same world. The walls always looked wet, even in summer. Mirrors fog faster. And sometimes, if you stood long enough, your own reflection seemed to hesitate before following you. Then came the stories. A photographer claimed to have captured two women walking in the same direction on a long exposure shot, their outlines overlapping perfectly. A taxi driver said he saw a girl waving from the mouth of the alley one rainy evening, only for her to vanish when he blinked. A teenage runaway swore she heard laughter there one night. Soft, familiar, doubled. But the most haunting discovery came years later, during routine street maintenance. When workers broke open part of the alley floor to repair a drainage line, they found an old compact mirror embedded in the concrete. Inside, the glass was fractured, but the reflection, even in pieces, showed two faces. Both smiling, both identical. The mirror was sent to evidence, then lost, just like everything else. Time moved on. Buildings changed. Lights were replaced, and the city slowly rebuilt over its ghosts. Yet the Holt twins remained, not as women, not even as names, but as sensations. The flicker before déjà vu, the chill that comes when you think you've dreamed a moment before it happens. If you ask someone who lived near Mulberry long enough, they might tell you about the letters. Every few years, one appears, slipped under a door, pinned to a notice board, tucked between library pages. Always the same handwriting. Always unsigned. The messages are short, simple, and familiar. I remember now. She crossed first. The reflection learned to breathe. And always at the bottom one final line. Meet me where the memories split. No one has ever claimed to see who leaves them. No one ever will. But if you stand there, truly stand there, you begin to feel it. The hum of something beneath the city's pulse. The faintest trace of two lives still walking in parallel, bound not by time but by remembrance. You realize that maybe they never disappeared. Maybe they simply stepped sideways, into the fold between what was and what is. Because some disappearances aren't losses. They're transformations. Memory itself becomes their afterlife. Each retelling, each whisper, keeping them alive in the circuitry of a city. Their story no longer belongs to the newspapers or police files. It belongs to everyone who has ever looked into a mirror and wondered, what if the reflection is a real one? And on rare nights, when the snow falls silently and the city lights blur into gold, a shadow still moves down Mulberry Alley. Two silhouettes, walking hand in hand, their faces obscured by mist. They pass under the flickering light without sound, without fear, without end. The camera doesn't catch them anymore, but the city does. Some stories close, some fade. This one lingers, just at the edge of what memory dares to hold. Because the Holt twins were never gone. They were simply waiting to be remembered.